The Bothy Storytelling Podcast is a member of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB. Welcome to the Bothy Storytelling Podcast. I'm your host, Calumlykanspokenword, and here we have another episode, and this one is Brave and Free Part 2, the second half of the show that I performed live in Parksville, so some more traditional Scottish tales coming your way. But before we do that, let's have a word from one of our sponsors. Let's Do Coffee by the Modgy Centre at Nate. It's hosted by Daniel Van Vielen and produced by the Modgy Centre for New Venture and Student Entrepreneurship at Nate. Each episode features an interview with a student entrepreneur or NATE alumnus. They dive into topics that explore their challenges, questions and fears involved in operating their companies. It comes out every 2 weeks, and if you wish to find out more, head over to nate.ca/Modgy Centre. That's nate.ca/Modgy Centre for Let's Do Coffee by the Modgy Centre at Nate, hosted by Daniel Van Vielen. Well, all I can say, folks, is sit back and enjoy Brave and Free Traditional Tales of Scotland, the second half, performed live in Parksville. This is more traditional tales from Scotland. And we'll kick off the second half if you're all ready. Did we lose anyone? Right, no one was brave enough to run out. Yeah, I would have found them. I'd have tracked them down. I'm not going to say any more. I used to tell a joke of what I'd do if I found people who walked out or gave me a bad review.
Oh, tell us.
Sure. I used to basically threaten people at my shows and I said, if you give me a bad review, I will find out where you live. I will come to your house. I will get naked and I will hide in your fridge. Now, I'm not going to do anything aggressive, I just like fridges. That's it. I won't do that, I promise. Although you guys have got big fridges. That joke doesn't really work as well over here because we've got tiny fridges. So it makes it, it's a scale thing. Okay, is everyone returned? I think everyone is pretty much back. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for joining me for the second half. You know what? I've just been told what a numpty I was. I forgot to tell you all I've got a CD out there. So if anyone's interested in some gruesome and grisly Scottish historical tales, because Scotland is a miserable, nasty, horrible, violent little country, that's why we're so nice. Oh, we're miserable. But no, Scottish history is really dark and it's beautiful. And I did a CD all about it, and it really is. I might tell a story. If you've all got strong stomachs, I might tell you a wee gruesome story later. We'll see. I'll put it to the vote first, of course, because of the nature. However, I've had a great time over on the island. I've only been here for a couple of days, and I've been very kindly hosted by lovely Bob and Helen at the front here, and it was lovely. They put me up in the house and fed me haggis. Oh, you've no idea how much I've missed that wee furry beastie. Oh, they've looked after me well, and then today I was over at Marver's catching up with her, which has been lovely. So I've had a great time here. But as I mentioned, the Cayley culture. You know, you take a story from, you get a wee story from your head, one that, you've been talking to people, and I thought, when I've been talking to Bob over the last few days, I thought there was a wee story I should tell tonight. And this one is for Bob and Helen for their great hospitality this last couple of days. Because how many of you have heard of the most famous battle in Scotland? Bannockburn. Now there is a reason it's the most famous battle in Scotland. Can anyone guess that reason? It's the only one we won. We are milking it to the end of days. If you followed Scottish history and Scottish sports, there is one thing we're no good at, and it's any of it. Curling is about the only thing we're good at. Don't get it. Scottish history, our warfare is very complex. during the Wars of Independence and times like that, we were actually banned from warfare throughout many times in periods of history. Are you all familiar with the Highland Games? You know, tossing the caber and all that. Well, the reason those games kind of were developed is that was the Scots way of training. We weren't allowed to use or train or fight with weapons, so we started to use that to keep ourselves fit and combat ready. Now, can anyone see the flaw in this? I study history and love history, and there is at no point I have ever seen any historical document that says, and the English charged at the Scots, and all of a sudden great big trees started flying through the air. I've never seen it. I'm sorry. If anybody has read this, please let me know. Which then makes me wonder about curling, because pushing a bit of rock across the ice and brushing it. You know, I've never again read an article that we ever took the English on water or ice, and certainly no one was brave enough to brush a rock. And again, don't you move, don't you move. Just didn't happen. But Bannockburn, no, I'm moving the stage, sorry, let me just before I have an incident. Oh dear, I get too animated at times. Bannockburn was our greatest battle, and I love the history of Bannockburn. A few years back we had our big anniversary, the Battle of Bannockburn, 700-year anniversary. As I say, we really, you know, there was 701 years, 702 years, but we need to celebrate winning. Is there any English in the room? Right, one or two. Okay, I promise I won't be mean. Anyway, Bannockburn was an interesting setup because if you don't know much about Robert the Bruce, he was the crowned king of Scotland, but he basically went through a very turbulent time. I respect the Bruce a lot because he was basically dishonest. You know, you can almost trust a dishonest man. Wallace, on the other hand, was a very honest man. He was a Boy Scout. Didn't trust him. Something suspicious there. But the Bruce fought for the English as many times as he fought for the Scottish. So he fought on both sides. It was all politics, folks, back then. But eventually he realised he had to become the king. And the reason he actually was forced into it was through a bit of treachery. He had a great enemy, the Comyns. And it was either the Comyns or the Bruces for the crown. And eventually the Comyns decided, I will give it to the Bruce. And they had a meeting and said, here, you can have the crown. And the Bruce thought, okay, let's do this. But what had actually happened is the Comyns had basically betrayed him and sent a message. I was about to say an email. They'd sent a message down to Longshanks, the hammer of the Scots, a rather delightful fellow. He was the King of England who had basically taken over the rule of Scotland for a while. And they basically sent a message saying the Bruce is going to betray you. And the Bruce was immediately called to London and he didn't know anything. He thought he was going for another kind of council meeting. As he's walking in to Edward's court, somebody hands him a wee package. And in it is a couple of coins and a set of spurs. It was a message to say, get a horse and get out of here. So the Bruce charged home, knowing that he'd been found out. There was a wee bit of an incident where he accidentally killed someone in a graveyard as well. We'll bypass that because we want to get to the actual main story. But he takes the crown of Scotland and he's the King of Scotland. And now he's hiding in the heather. He's been hunted. He can't actually take a throne. He's been hunted throughout Scotland and for years he hides in the Islands and Highlands. But what he's doing is he's building his armies, building his men, and slowly taking back castle after castle after castle as he builds his army. He's using the age-old tactics of guerrilla warfare because the Scots knew we could never take the English in open battle because of the Great War Horse. There's also a reason why most of the castles in Scotland are in ruins. And it's not because of war or battles that happened there. It was actually Bruce being a great tactician. When he took the castles back, he deconstructed them. He took them apart so the English couldn't take them again and get a foothold. So that's why we have a lot of organised rocks in Scotland. However, the Bruce starts to do this until eventually two castles are left. Edinburgh Castle and Stirling Castle. the gateway to the north. And the Bruce says, you know what, my brother? Go take the castle. He sends his brother Edward. There's a lot of Edwards at this time, I've noticed. But he sends his brother Edward to Stirling and tells him to take the castle, thinking Edward's a good military man, he'll do it. And the months went by with the siege, and Edward was getting nowhere until one day he makes a blunder. He calls a parley, and he makes a deal with the captain of the castle. Basically, it's a very simple deal. I'll give you a year. If the English army can come up to Stirling and relieve you, the Scots will leave. If they don't, you guys leave the castle and the Scots walk in. Sounds pretty sensible, doesn't it? Does everyone agree this is a very wise deal? It was the worst deal possible. It was the worst thing ever, because what it did is it gave Longshanks the excuse he needed to bring his armies up north. And now Bruce is furious with his brother. And a little side note to the Bruce, he is not a good man. And you know what? He's a man of his time. He actually sent his brother to Ireland, hoping his brother would get killed. He sent his brother over to Ireland to try and take those kingdoms, hoping that he would get wiped out and it would save him the hassle of having to deal with his brother. But the Bruce now had to prepare for Bannockburn. Now, fortune was on his side because Longshanks died, leaving Longshanks' son, who by all accounts was a very effeminate, useless individual. He started to rip apart the generals and leaders by putting his favourites in positions of power. So by the time the English get to Bannockburn, they're almost in civil war themselves. But the Bruce prepares his men. He starts to lay traps and horse traps and spikes. He trains his men in the famous Shiltron. How many of you have seen that delightfully inaccurate movie, Braveheart? Yeah. Freedom. Tiny little Australian man. Well, basically, what Wallace had done with the trees and the spikes was accurate. The Bruce advanced it. I want you to imagine a human porcupine. He basically got his men in circles with the spikes out, and he got them manoeuvring. So they actually could dance almost around the battlefield, so it wasn't just lines. He was ready. But all the time, the Bruce is thinking about retreat, because he knows we can't win. He's got his men camped at the forest, ready just to slip into the woods. But the day of the great victory of Bannockburn, which was not the day of the battle, it was the day before, goes like this. Actually, I should say, does anyone know Scots Way? Yeah? Robert Burns' poem is about his interpretation of the Battle of Bannockburn. Well, this is the Bruce's, or calumlykanspokenword's interpretation of the Battle of Bannockburn, and it goes like this. We know that the Bruce was riding up and down in front of his men that day, inspiring them. Now, we didn't have war horses, we had palfreys or ponies. He wasn't heavily armoured, a leather jerkin, and he had a simple hand axe at his side. And the Bruce was riding up and down, inspiring his men. We're gonna crush the English, and the Scottish armies would have went wild. I'm never going to ask for any participation other than this. We're going to crush the English, and the Scottish armies would have went wild. Yeah! Oh, that's more like it. We're going to, we've got a couple of younger members, we'll keep this one clean. We're going to steal their packed lunches so they go hungry during the battle. We're going to pinch their underwear so they're as drafty as us, and the Scots will win. And he was riding up and down in front of his men, just getting them going, inspiring them like any leader would have. But as he did this, he didn't realise he was actually drifting away from his men. He actually kind of got himself a wee bit lost until there was quite a gap between his men. And that's when it happened, coming through the Tor woods, a contingent of English knights appeared. You see, they were so fed up with the young Edward's leadership, they had decided to fulfil the agreement. If the English can get to Stirling Castle and relieve the garrison, the Scots have to leave. These guys were charging to the castle. They cared not for battle. If they got to the castle, there would be no battle. But as one of them was charging across the field, he couldn't help but notice this lone rider. And as he looked closer, he happened to see that it had to be none other than Robert the Bruce, the King of the Scots. The young knight's name was de Bohun. There are variations of his name, Henry Guy de Bohun, we'll just call him de Bohun. And he was a young, arrogant knight. And he saw the Bruce, and he knew that he could finish it all. So he dropped his visor, he hooked his lance, kicked the flanks of his horse, and started to charge. He would have been dreaming of wealth and glory, fame and fortune. The Scottish army, on seeing this, would have been screaming and roaring for their king to return. They know if the Bruce dies, it's all over. Scotland would be lost. But on this day, Robert the Bruce turned his horse to look at this English knight, and he just sat in his saddle, and he did nothing. He sat and watched. The Scots would have been screaming and bellowing and going crazy. They would have been wanting their king returning. They would have started to charge across that field, knowing he was too far away from them. De Bohun would have been targeting the king, thinking about money, glory, land, women. He was going to be the celebrity. And the Bruce sat there. He sat in his saddle, doing nothing. The Scots running, panicking, screaming, begging for their king to act. De Bohun getting closer and closer and closer, knowing that all they needed to do was hit once in that chest and it would have ripped the king asunder. And all the Bruce did was sit and watch. Had he given up? Did he know there was no hope? Did he realise this was the best way? If he dies, it's over, there'll be no more bloodshed. De Bohun getting closer and closer and closer. The Scots screaming and wailing and charging towards the Bruce, and the Bruce sitting there calmly. And as that lance came within a hair's breadth of the King of the Scots, it was said that the Bruce kicked the flanks of his horse and it stepped to the side. He rose up in the stirrups, pulling out that single-handed axe, and he brought it down on the helm of De Bohun, cleaving both helm and skull in twain. The lifeless body of De Bohun would have hit the ground before he even knew he was dead. And the Scottish army would have went wild. Their king has just survived something they never expected. A man lightly armed has just gone up against a modern equivalent of a tank and won. The Scots would have went wild, cheering and roaring, and it said that the Bruce just simply cantered back to his line. Now, he had an open court. Anyone could speak to him as an equal, and his lugs would have been burning. His men would have told him off for hours. Reckless, careless, you would have lost it all for us. It would have been over. And it was said that the Bruce took it all. He took it graciously. He accepted the mistake he'd made. It was reckless, it was careless, but he'd survived. But then he goes to walk to his tent. And for the first time he happens to notice something. As he looks down at his hand, he's still clutching the broken axe handle tightly in his hand. And the Bruce looks down with a great sadness in his eyes. And the only thing he's reported to have said about that incident as he looked at that axe was great sadness. Oh, I've broken my best axe. Now, I love this wee tale, and I appreciate you're all laughing. But the reason I love it is because it is the only time Scotland and England have ever agreed. They have both documented historically that this account happened. That the Bruce, lightly armoured, killed a heavily armoured knight. And that incident sent ripples and shockwaves through the English army. Many of them deserted overnight for fear. They were thinking witchcraft or what power the Scots have. And when it came to the day of Bannockburn, it was a rout. The Scots advanced, the English knights couldn't get around the Schiltron, they were pushed back into the infantry. The infantry were getting crushed and stepping back. They were pushing back into the archers and crushing them. Then they hit the burn of Bannockburn. Yes. And they tumbled in and started dying, and it was said by the end of the day you could walk dry-shod across the burn with the bodies. The Scots hounded and harried the English back to England, and Bannockburn, and the greatest victory of the Scots, was won. Now, I love that tale. That makes me feel very patriotic. But here's also a little problem with that story. Elements of it are completely inaccurate. I studied militaria. I used to sell militaria. The axe that the Bruce used had a beautiful edge and then a big tin opener spike at the back. The historians have actually done tests. We did tests. We were maniacs in the shop. We were like, well, there's a helm. Let's hit it and see what happens. It dents it. It doesn't do anything. So when we actually read the official reports, some historians came up with a theory. The Bruce wouldn't have used the edge. He'd have turned it and put that spike down, and it would have penetrated through and killed the man instantly. So it would have done the exact same job as the story says. But the interesting thing about that is, if you know Bannockburn, Robert the Bruce didn't fight in the battle. He was in the reserves. This caused a little bit of an issue to a lot of people, until some historians actually realised there was probably a very good reason for this. Those great war horses are coming at you anything between 30 and 40 kilometres an hour. You're a man standing stationary on your horse. As it's charging by, you bring that down on someone's head enough to shatter the handle, and for some reason leave it really tightly in your grip. So they actually realised there was a very good chance that the Bruce dislocated his arm, probably ripped it out of the socket and shattered most of his arm with that impact, leaving him clutching very tightly an axe handle. You couldn't tell your men you had got injured. You had to be brave. You had to show a certain prowess as the king. So the easiest way to avoid any discovery of this injury would be to have him in reserves giving orders rather than the front line. So Robert the Bruce is one of our greatest heroes to this day. He brought freedom to Scotland. Oh, I did say that, didn't I? Sorry. I always said no Scotsman ever says freedom. And basically the Battle of Bannockburn, one of the greatest victories in Scotland, was won by our hero, Robert the Bruce. So there's a wee bit of history of Scotland and a wee story for my gracious host. Okay, who would like a gruesome and grisly tale? I need to see, is everyone okay? Has everyone got strong stomachs?
Yeah.
I'm going to look at Marva. Are we okay for a gruesome and grisly, Marva?
Even the young lad raised his hand.
Good. Marva has brought me here, so I better make sure she's happy. On my CD, there are many delightful stories. One of my favourite is about the resurrection men. Now, resurrection men, or grave robbers, were a huge thing in Scotland. When we hit our age of enlightenment, basically what happened is Edinburgh hit this, and we became a cultural grounds for education. People travelled from all over the world for literature, architecture, the arts, technology, and of course, medicine. Medicine was our biggest industry. We had schools of medicine teaching people the anatomy, curing diseases, doing all this wonderful work. But there was a problem. And that problem was supply and demand. You see, the medical departments were only ever given 2 hung criminals a year to dissect. Problem is, sometimes they were teaching 500 plus students per teacher. So I want you to do the maths with me. You have 500 students and 1 body. Give that body to the first 150 who slice, dice, cut, grot, shave, put makeup on, do whatever they do, and it starts to get a bit mucky. Give it to the next 150 who slice, dice, chop, saw, gut, etc. And what you have at the end of that is soup. Now, soup I don't know if any of you know, is not a very good educational tool. So, of course, the doctors, the surgeons had a problem. But Edinburgh, I love that city because they are the finest entrepreneurial minds. I kid you not. Nowhere in the world do we come up with ideas like we do in Edinburgh. And I can only imagine most of them are done in a pub. So I can I get the scenario that always goes through my head is this: group of people sitting in the pub, and they're all chatting away and saying, "Aye, do you know there's surgeons, they're a wee bit shy in bodies at the moment, and they're having a wee dram, and then after a few drams, you know, you get those great ideas, and one of them comes up with, hear me out, hear me out, I think I've got this. They need bodies, right? Now, stay with me. There's a graveyard over there. No, wait, no, come on, keep going with me. We could creep into that graveyard, dig up fresh bodies, and sell them to the anatomists. And oddly enough, everyone went, oh, that sounds reasonable. The age of the resurrection, man, was huge in Scotland. People were sneaking in, men and women, throughout all the days and nights into the graveyards. They were quite cunning, they weren't thugs, they had to come up with clever ideas. They realised that you couldn't disturb the grave or leave it looking disturbed, so they sewed Hessian sacks together. So if any soil fell out of place, when they lift the sack, it fell onto the mound. They realised that wooden shovels didn't make sound. Metal shovels would. So you dig in the dead of the night, you wouldn't make sound. They also realised really quickly that a body's quite a big thing to dig up. But if you only uncover the head and the shoulders, it's a lot easier to get out. Using these two fingers and the nostrils. Yeah, they literally would put their fingers in the nostril and drag the body out using that. And basically, they would then put them in a herring barrel or a sea chest, cart them off, and they would get 5-10 shillings, you know, for the body. It was a lucrative business, but dangerous. You could be shot or hung. Now, Edinburgh was filled with some great guys. Our two most famous resurrection men were William Burke and William Hare. Two Irishmen. Absolute geniuses. They had come over to dig the Union Canal. They had been put out of work when it was finished. And again, I can only imagine they sat in a pub thinking, what are we going to do? Until one of them went, you know what, we should go dig up bodies. It's good work, you know, we're men of means, we can do this. And they sat in the pub having that dram and going, oh, it's awfully hard work though. Digging up a dead body's a tough job. And that's when they came up with a great solution. As they looked out at the busy grass market, that light bulb came on. Why go to the effort of digging up dead bodies when there's so many of them walking around waiting to happen? So they went into a very lucrative business of making their own bodies. William Burke and William Hare became Edinburgh's two most notorious serial killers. They had a great technique and a very joyous one. They would get you drunk. They would take you home and give you a party like no other party, and when you were passing out with a whiskey, one would jump in your chest and pin you down, one would clamp thumb and finger under chin and shut off your airways. It was a term that was later known as burking. But they would take the bodies unharmed, looking natural deaths, and sell them. Until they were eventually caught, and all good things have got to come to an end. And basically, one was tried and one turned king's evidence. Good loyal friend. It was him, he made me do it. I'll tell you everything if I get away scotch-free. And that's what happened. William Burke ended up being the sacrificial lamb. He was a brutal man anyway. We had fun with him. Has anyone been to Edinburgh? Did you know the story of William Burke and William Hare and what we did to Burke? We hung him to within an inch of his life. We took him from the gallows, barely breathing and alive. He was strapped to a table where a wee man had been standing, sharpening knives all day and putting them in a hot fire. Have you ever peeled an apple? That's what we did to Burke. We skinned him. It was the biggest public execution in Edinburgh. And we peeled him alive. They say they got about 48% of his flesh off before he died. So we didn't give up there. Oh no, this is Scotland. So what we did is we continued to skin him and we gave the cadaver to the anatomists. A little bit of payback. And they basically dissected him and then thought, this guy, he's kind of famous. So they cleaned and bleached his bones and mounted his skeleton in Surgeons' Hall. Oh, but it doesn't end there. Because we gave we looked at that lovely skin and went, we should do something with this. And they gave it to a man who basically treated it. And they told him to make things from it. And that man made some things from Burke's flesh. Again, in my head, there's no way to explain this other than just the simple scenario. He's flipping that body back and forth, thinking, what am I going to do with this? Until he flips it and looks at William Burke's buttocks. And then he's looking at those buttocks and he's like, Mary, come here. Look at this man's buttocks. Do you think that would make a fine Bible? I kid you not. We made the holiest of holies from William Burke's arse. Sorry, the wee one's there. We made from his chest a wallet, and from the back of his hand a business card holder. And all these items are on display on Edinburgh to this day. But that's not actually the story I want to tell you. The story I want to tell you is about a man called Brown. Now, Brown was a great resurrection man. He was one of the finest, but he decided to get lazy and follow in the footsteps of Burke and Hare. He wanted to make his own victims. He was rubbish. The first time he went out, he got caught, arrested, tried and sentenced to death. And he was hung to death at the Grassmarket gallows. Brown was taken from the gallows, the doctor checked him, signed the death certificate, slapped it down on his chest and walked out the tent, which must have come as a heck of a shock to Brown as he shot bolt upright, gasping, looking at his own death certificate. Now, it must have also frightened the hangman who was in that room. Well, the problem with the hangman is he's now looking at Brown going, I'm not going to get paid. See, a hangman's reputation is for a successful hanging. He gets paid for it, and the successful hanging gets him more work. Now Brown's going to ruin it all. He's not going to get paid, and he's not going to have a reputation. So the hangman thinks there's only one solution. He drags Brown back out. He takes him up to the gallows. He puts a rope round his neck. He drops him. He then clambers under the gallows, grabs Brown's ankles, and drops his weight. And stretches Brown's neck properly a second time. But now the hangman's got a problem. Maggie Dixon is a famous case in Edinburgh. Half hang it, Maggie. She survived the gallows and basically as a result changed the law in Edinburgh. Anyone who survives the gallows is classed as an act of God and they're then free to go about their life. Our hangman had just killed an innocent man now. A man who had been deprived of all his former sins, making the hangman the murderer. So the hangman now has to do something to get rid of the evidence, so he decides there's one way to do it, and he gets the anatomists and sells Brown to the anatomists. Slice and dice will get rid of the evidence, and no one will know any better. So Brown's body is taken to Surgeons' Hall. But Brown's body is not meant for anything as mundane as the old slice and dice. The nephew of the famous Galvani had entered Edinburgh. If you don't know much about Galvani, he is the man that developed the chemical battery test. He wired up frogs to a chemical battery, and it meant that the limbs twitched, the muscles with the electricity twitched. Galvani's nephew had been developing the process, and now our frog's name was Brown. Brown was strapped into a chair in the theatre. Now, everyone was invited, lords and ladies and doctors and surgeons. You see, this wasn't really a medical experiment. This was a theatrical experiment. This was to show people the wonders of technology. And there, Brown sat in the chair. And Galvani's nephew, he was a pompous little so-and-so, all frills and happiness, giving these speeches of grandiose, telling everyone about his wonderful advancements on the work. And then, when he had everyone's attention, he flicked the first switch. The whole theatre started oohing and eyeing. Because there on the stage, one of Brown's hands started to twitch. They couldn't believe this. This was amazing. Galvani, kind of jeered on by this, looking at the success, the reaction, he quickly, with a flourish, hits the second switch. Now the whole audience are on their feet. Oh, bravo, bravo, magnificent! Because now, both of Brown's hands are dancing with the electricity. And everything is going splendidly well, right up to the exact moment when Brown's head shoots upright, his eyes open, and he starts screaming the most blood-curdling scream you have ever heard. Eyes wide, staring at the audience. Now everybody is in shock. They can't believe what's happening, and the cries of bravo turn to, turn it off. He's alive! Turn it off! He's alive! Galvani is panicking. This has never happened. None of the frogs have ever sat up and started screaming at him. He does not know what to do at this point, and his panic takes him to an extreme. He looks around and sees the first thing and grabs a scalpel. And then he quickly runs it across Brown's throat, sending a beautiful gout of arterial spray across it was majestically arcing across the audience. And the first two rows got more than they bargained for that night. Now we have screams, we have fainting, we have vomiting, we have all the doctors and surgeons. Big Galvani's panicked. He doesn't know what to do, and all he hears in his head is, turn it off, he's alive. Turn it off, he's alive, and he needs to prove to these people this was not the case. This man was dead. It was his electricity that basically made him look alive. So he gets the orderlies to get Brown's body splayed out. And as quickly as he can, in front of this audience of lords and ladies, he slices and saws and sawed. Sorry, are we okay there? I didn't bring the bag. Sorry, did we forget the seat bag? And he cracks open the ribs, and as quickly as he can, he rips out the heart, holding it up to the audience and making a statement so bold and grand. Ladies and gentlemen, he was dead all along. It was just the electricity that made him look as if he was alive. Sounds reasonable. It does. It sounds perfectly plausible explanation. The problem with this is Galvani was completely in his own world. He wasn't paying attention to anything, because as he stood and made such a bold statement, the audience weren't looking at him. They were looking at this as it slowly beat its last beats in his hand. Now, how many of you believe this story? No, honestly, who believes this story? Wow, how untrusting. Well, you know what? This is a true story. It's actually documented in the records at Surgeons Hall. It's also documented in the police records because it was a murder. And it's basically a great tale from Edinburgh that I love, but it's got another wee afternote because it has created the finest ghost story and sighting in Edinburgh's history. If you were ever lucky to go to Surgeons Hall, walking those hallowed halls, looking at all the wonderful things, Burke's skeleton, his buttocks, his chest, you might at some point think, I just feel like I'm being watched. And you kind of turn around and there'll be nothing there, but if you get really lucky, you'll not just feel like you're being watched, you'll feel like you're being followed. And if you're the luckiest person in the world, you'll turn round and you'll see him. You'll see Brown, and he'll be coming towards you. He'll have his hand outstretched. His eyes will be wide, his mouth still in that horrendous scream. Blood will be pouring from his neck. His eyes will be fixed on you with his hand out, and he'll be offering you something. And what he's trying to offer you is his heart. Because I believe, even in death, ghosts need love. time for another wee quick story before I release you back into the normal world. And hopefully I haven't grossed too many people out with that. And as you can believe, one of my favourite tales. I love telling that story. It's funny and also incredibly dark history. If you get a chance to do tours in Edinburgh, if you ever visit, you will find that our history is not just brutal and dark, but some of it is so ridiculously brutal and dark that it actually makes you want to laugh because you just can't imagine it to be true. And there's so many stories from that city and the country that do this. But the story I want to finish on is one of our great legends of Scotland. He's actually a character from all over the world, Jack. Are you familiar with Jack? The Jack Tales. It's actually Jack and the Beanstalk. It's the same guy from Jack and the Beanstalk, but there's a whole wealth of his stories out there, and it's beautiful. There's stories from the early days up to being an old man, and I love Jack. He's a trickster, he's been a king, he's been a pauper, a farmer, he's fought the giant, he's taken death and trapped him in a nut. He has done it all. But the story I love is not about the young, vibrant Jack. It's about old man Jack. It's about Jack when he's in his 80s. He's getting on in the years. He's lost his beautiful love of his life. So he's alone. But he does have his daughter and his grandkids and her husband. And it gets to the point that the daughter says, no, enough's enough. Dad, you're coming to live with us. We want to look after you. You've done everything for us over the years. Let us look after you. So Jack moves in with his family now. Think about all those stories. Think about all those years of adventure. Those grandkids, every night round the fire. And there's old Jack telling them stories. And the family is just so happy. And so is Jack. But there's one thing about that man that has never changed. His love for the land. Nothing makes old Jack happier than getting his fingers dirty, getting in the muck and planting and seeding and working the garden. And the wee cottage that he's now at has a wee garden. And one day he's out there, and it's a bonny day. He's knee deep in the muck, planting, weeding, having the time of his life. When all of a sudden the peace and quiet of his world is disturbed. And it's like the thunders of heaven above, a huge noise coming towards him. And it gets louder and louder and then shoots by and disappears. But as it shoots by the cottage, he hears a thud on the street. But old Jack knows better. He doesn't even do anything. He just keeps his head down and works away until he hears that thunderous noise disappear and vanish. And then when it's all silent, old Jack sticks his head up and he sees a big bag in the middle of the road. Well, he thinks to himself, we can't leave that there, can we? So he goes and he tries to pick it up, and it's a ton weight. It's a fair heavy thing. But he struggles and he carries it, and he gets it into the house, and he kind of carries it to his room, and he dumps it on the bed, and then he opens it. And the whole room is bathed in a golden glow. It's a bag filled with gold. And as Jack looks at it, it dawns on him. That was a tax man. It was a tax wagon that was away by and brought this bag of gold. And he thinks to himself, there's a lot of money in there. That would keep me and my family happy for many generations. I wonder how I can keep this. I've got to try and keep this for my family. So Jack does what every man needs to do when there's a complex thing to be done. He ties up that bag and sticks it under his bed. He lays down on the bed and stares at the ceiling, puts his hands behind his head, closes his eyes just to have a wee think. And all of a sudden he's in those deep, heavy, thinking breaths as Jack decides what to do with this bag. And the next morning when he wakes up, he's got it. He knows how to keep this money. He knows what to do. So he heads down the stairs, and there's his daughter in the kitchen, and she's stirring the porridge with a spurtle. It's all going well. The bairns are at the table, desperate for their breakfast. It's a beautiful scene, and old Jack comes down, looks at the bairns and says, do you have a satchel for your old granddad. And the parents are like, "Ah, we've got a spare satchel. We'll get it for you." And they run up the stairs. Now the daughter's stirring and very quickly it stops. As she listens to what her dad said and it goes through her head, she thinks, what's he need a satchel for? So she turns and asks him, "Dad, why do you need a satchel?" And old Jack looks at his daughter and says, "Well, what else am I going to carry my school books in?" Now the daughter looks at her dear old dad in his elderly years and she starts to think all those adventures. All that mischief and mayhem had started to go for him. He's starting to lose it. Oh no, what am I going to do? This is my dear old dad. So she thinks the first thing she can do is stop it. She can stop the kids getting the satchel. And she runs up after them. But old Jack's in that kitchen and he's pacing and he's thinking it's not quite right. Something's still wrong. I've got to do more. And then he sees the kitchen shears. And he realises, perfect. He grabs the shears and starts hacking away at his trousers. So when his daughter comes back down, there is Jack, proudly standing in the kitchen in a pair of school shorts. He grabs the satchel and before she can say anything, he's gone. He's got the bairns and he's away to school. And old Jack sits in school that day. And he learns his ABCs. He learns his maths. He learns some history and a wee bit of geography. And all the while the teacher's sitting at the front of the class looking at this old man going, "Oh, poor old soul. Poor old man." And then Jack, the bell goes, and they all head home for dinner. Now that is an awkward thing. As they all sit round the dinner table, the wife, her husband, old Jack and the two grandbairns, and the daughter is looking at her dad. And she's like, how was school? How was school, Dad? Did you enjoy school? And Jack's, "Oh, I loved it. I learnt my ABCs. I learnt my maths. I found out where these weird countries were. Oh, it was brilliant." And all the while, the husband and the daughter are going, "Oh no, poor man." And they're looking at each other and that kind of telepathic husband and wife thing's going, "Who's going to go for the doctor?" Oh no. They're getting worried. But they have their supper and they all go to bed. But Jack in his head's going, "This isn't enough. Still not right. I need more." And he's lying in bed and it comes to him and he waits till he hears everyone's asleep. And he creeps back down to the kitchen. In the kitchen he gets the biggest pot he can find. He gets the porridge, pours it in the pot and he starts to mix himself the biggest vat of porridge. And when it's ready, carries it out the back door. It's a monstrous thing. And he sits it down while he gets 2 bricks and a plank of wood. And he takes that pot and he sits at the end of that plank of wood. And then old Jack steps back and he starts to wind up. He starts to get his body going. He's going and then he runs up to that plank and he jumps on the other end. And that pot of porridge shoots into the heavens. And as it shoots into the heavens, it starts to spin. And that porridge starts to fly everywhere. It covers the eaves, the windows, the doors, the garden. It covers everything in porridge. And old Jack stares at his handiwork. Aye, that'll do. And then he goes to the back door. He gets himself ready. Relaxes himself, prepares himself, grabs the door handle, throws open the door and starts screaming, "It's raining porridge! It's raining porridge!" And the whole house leaps up. They can't believe what they're hearing. The kids, well, they're excited. They're doing the door out and they're sliding in the porridge, having porridge fight, building porridge men. They're doing it all. The husband and wife sit bolt upright and look at each other and they're thinking, who's going for the doctor? They run down the stairs. They run out to grab the kids, the old man, and they freeze. Because sure enough, it's rained porridge. Everything is covered in porridge. They can't believe it is dripping off the eaves. Well, it took them a fair while to get the bairns cleaned and back into bed. Took them a while to get the old man calmed down. And basically, husband and wife went to bed and had a very uneasy sleep, not having a clue what had just happened. And what made the whole thing worse was the next morning, as old Jack got up and went out and did his garden, as if nothing had happened. And the next day, he did his garden. And the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And all of a sudden, the daughter's starting to think, did this actually happen? Did I dream it all? But then, about a week or so later, old Jack's sitting having a wee cup of tea in the morning when a heavy thud comes to the door. And he walks over and opens the door, and there standing is two big brawny men dressed head to toe in black. Old man, did you see a bag out the front of your house a wee while back? And old Jack went, aye. And they look at him and say, did you open that bag, old man? He said, what, you mean the big bag of gold? And they're like, yes. And then they ask, and do you know where that bag is, old man? Oh, I know where it is. It's upstairs under my bed. And of course, these are the taxmen. And they're looking at this sweet old man. And they're thinking, he's just admitted to finding the bag, knowing what's in it, and then hiding it from them. He has stolen the tax money. And they're looking at this old man and thinking to themselves, we're going to have to take him to prison. We're going to have to arrest him. So they start to grab old Jack and bundle him away when his daughter appears. Dad, what's going on here? Who are these men? And Jack's as quick as a whippet. Oh, dinna worry, love. Dinna worry. These are the two men that have just come for the bag of gold. And the daughter's face drops. Oh no. My dear old dad, he's just no right. Dad. When did you get this bag of gold? Where did it come from? When did it come? And old Jack looks at her like she's daft. And she went, darling, do you not remember anything? I found it the day I went back to school. And the daughter sits there, stands there for a minute and goes, wait a minute, Dad, wait a minute. Was that not the night it rained porridge? And the two taxmen stand there and look at this slifey and her dad, and they just think, these folk are no right in the heat. And then they realise that obviously this man knows nothing about the gold. He knows nothing about what's happening. And as quick as a flash, they turn on their heels and walk down the lane. They jump on their horses and they ride over the hill, never to be seen again. And ladies and gentlemen, I have it on very good authority that to this very day, Jack and his ancestors and his ancestors' ancestors and his ancestors' ancestors, to this very day, are still living on the good taxpayers' money of Scotland, and living and having a fine life on it too. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Took a wee bit more of the time than I meant to, so thank you very much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that episode with the live show from Parksville, but let's move on and have our book recommendation. And as I mentioned in the show, in honour to my wonderful hosts, Bob and Helen, I hope I've got that right. I'm pretty sure it was Bob and Helen. I'll need to find their card. It is kicking about here. The book I want to recommend is a really nice wee old one, and it's called I Was at Bannockburn by Agnes Muir Mackenzie, illustrated by Mackay. Now, I love this wee book because it's a really old one that I found in a second-hand bookshop in Edinburgh. And I kid you not, I mean, the dates in here for the people that have owned it date back to 1948. And the various prices of this thing have gone up and down. But I know for a fact that the jacket and sleeve were all repaired. It must have been in a sorry wee state when it arrived in that bookshop. But this is a great wee book filled with wonderful stories about Robert the Bruce.
The Lady in the Crown, The King and the Heather, The Heart of Bruce, Edinburgh Rockets, all there, all these great wee accounts of Robert the Bruce and his exploits on the run-up to Bannockburn. So, it's a wonderful wee book, simply called I Was at Bannockburn by Agnes Muir Mackenzie, illustrated by Mackay, and I love it to bits. It's a great wee book, and if you can find a wee copy, it might be hard to do, I would search it out. So that was I Was at Bannockburn, and that is our book recommendation. And of course, straight after our book recommendation comes our podcast recommendation. Now, you must know by now we're part of the Alberta Podcast Network. The Bothy is a proud member of that, and we keep promoting their podcast because simply they're fantastic. So this episode's recommendation, we have done a storytelling session. We've been talking all about stories. This one, telling stories. So I would recommend the Otherwise podcast. It's a variety podcast dedicated to empowering diverse communities living on Treaty 6 territory by sharing stories of their lived experiences. So that is Otherwise, a variety podcast dedicated to empowering diverse communities living on Treaty 6 territory by sharing stories of their lived experiences. And that is the Bothy Storytelling Podcast's Alberta Podcast Network recommendation for this episode. And with that, we come to the end of another episode of the Bothy Storytelling Podcast. And this one has been another live show, from Parksville, the second half of Brave and Free. I hope you enjoyed it. As I say, I can only apologise a wee bit about the quality of the recordings. It wasn't the best environment. I didn't have the proper equipment, but I wanted to get these out. You know what? I hope you enjoyed anyway. You've probably heard a few of these stories with the other podcasts, but these were live. It's a completely different experience. You need to come and see me live. It's part storytelling, part sex on a stick, part kilted majesty, part whiskey-infused nonsense, and the occasional laugh. I'm not going to say I'm a comedian, but apparently I can make people laugh occasionally. I'm happy with that, as long as they leave having a good time. Anyway, with that in mind, I'll see you all on the next episode of the Bothy Storytelling Podcast.